The question that torments all of us is, how do we stop our thoughts? Let's start with the simplest methods, and by the end of the video, we'll move on to more complex and sophisticated ones. Look, the simplest thing in my opinion is just to do this. Take 3 to 5 deep breaths in and out. As you inhale, inflate your belly. Make sure your stomach is relaxed. There's no point in holding any tension there. Over time, you'll realize that tension partly leads to thoughts. So, take a breath all the way in, pause briefly, and then exhale completely. Pull your stomach in as you exhale and hold your breath for a moment. Hold your breath for 2 to 3 seconds, then inhale again. And exhale. So after a full inhale, make a pause. And after a full exhale, also pause and pull in your stomach. This method is available to absolutely everyone, but keep in mind that what worked once may not work the next time, and you'll have to remember other ways to stop your thoughts. The next method is to try to switch your focus to something else. This is also not very difficult. For example, if you have a stream of obsessive thoughts about some situation, you simply take and start thinking about something else. Try to latch on to some feeling that is pleasant to you right now. Well, for example, remember how yesterday you went somewhere with your friends, had lively conversations, discussed something? It doesn't have to be yesterday, it could be any time, really. Basically, yes, recall some situation that also grabs your attention. Start to replay it in your mind, think about it. It will push out your current situation. And then you can just relax, and you'll find yourself with a more diffused, lighter stream of thoughts. The next method is also simple. You can take your phone, open some short videos, or just something interesting, read the news, read something, and you'll get distracted as well. The only downside to distractions is that they are almost always followed by an even stronger stream of thoughts. If you have some kind of anxious situation, then most likely, in my experience, as I used to try before, when something unpleasant happened, I would watch a movie or try to distract myself, but after the movie, it's like you pull your head out of the sand and you become aware again of everything that happened to you. It all comes back and builds up again, and it even feels worse because of the contrast. That's why I never really liked those methods. For me, it's somehow easier to deal with the situation, to process it, rather than bury my head in the sand and try to distract myself. But if there's no anxious undertone to your thoughts, then why not? You can distract yourself with a movie, you can call a friend and chat, and in just 5 minutes, you'll switch over to the conversation, especially if it's interesting, and you'll forget what you were thinking about. In fact, you can come up with a lot of such ways. Have some tea, distract yourself with something that grabs your attention. In the end, you can just wash your face with cold water. Let's move on. Concentration. Take any point, any object that we perceive as neutral, so we will use it as a point of focus. For example, let's say I'm looking at the lid of a teapot. It doesn't evoke any emotions or feelings in me. And essentially what I'm doing is I need to align my focus and tune into it more deeply. So by consistently focusing on this neutral object, it's as if I'm transmitting a clear and deliberate signal to my own mind that I am completely and utterly indifferent to the situation. Indifferent to what? Indifferent to everything. So while I'm looking at the lid of the teapot and let's say some thoughts come up, I kind of pull myself away from the field of interest in those thoughts and back into the field of the teapot lid. Well, I don't have any thoughts right now, but if I did, that's how you could try to do it. That is, just simply concentrate. Don't get distracted from the object. Any object you want. And the point here is precisely in having an anchor. Thoughts arise, but we don't follow them, we hold on. It's as if there's a storm, somewhere out at sea, you're in the water, and suddenly you grab onto some log. The task is simply to hold on, to grab it and hold on. That is, nothing more is required from you. You can try it right now, you just concentrate. The stream of thoughts slows down, becomes more sparse. The next method, which I practiced myself, but I practiced it because I didn't have any other options. Ideas on how to stop thoughts. I would just simply, when walking down the street or riding the subway, holding onto the handrail, and thoughts keep coming, and you try to wedge yourself into them somehow, and it's like you tense up, and by sheer willpower, you don't allow yourself to follow the thoughts, even though they keep going. And here, the idea is also about concentration, almost the same as when you look at the lid of a teapot. It's the same thing, just without an object, simply concentration. So you try to pull yourself together, to explain to yourself that it's normal when you're just in the moment and not thinking, yeah, why do these thoughts pull you out of the moment? What right do they have if you don't want them to? You even start to wonder, what am I if I don't control the present moment? In other words, it's not just that I don't control it. I don't even interact with it in any way. I have thoughts about what I see. For example, you see me right now, and certain thoughts come to your mind. Yes, some of those thoughts can be read in the comments, but why do they arise? And a person will always find some explanation for why. But that too will just be thoughts. So essentially, there is some kind of program that triggers certain thoughts. We identify ourselves with this program. And it turns out that we can't help but think, yes, it's as if our life doesn't belong to us. But through concentration, through effort, we say, no, my life belongs to me. I don't want to think about this. And we try to pull ourselves together and hold on. And you'll notice that you still create some kind of support for yourself. It's just that maybe it won't be on the object, or maybe it will. Maybe you'll feel a tension in your solar plexus. Maybe your head will tense up, or your eyes. You'll start to look more closely, or listen more intently. It's just a kind of intuitive concentration. I used to do this often myself, but I didn't realize exactly what I was doing. But sometimes I managed to stop my thoughts, even if just for a couple of seconds, and then they would start up again. The next method is to stop breathing. If you observe how your thoughts arise, you'll be surprised. Thoughts are like a coal that you blow on. Imagine a coal in a campfire. It's dying out, and you start blowing on it, and it flares up. In the same way, thoughts flare up when you inhale. And when you exhale, there are fewer thoughts. So it's even easier to maintain concentration, even in that teapot, when you exhale. When you inhale, it's harder to do this. So you can hold your breath for about 15 seconds, pull yourself together and say, I won't think for these 15 seconds. And just like that, on the exhale, or rather, while holding your breath, sit still and don't move. By the way, when you don't move, there are also a bit fewer thoughts because there are no associations with what you're doing. So you find a comfortable seat and become completely still. You hold your breath after exhaling and just sit there quietly. You can stop breathing while inhaling. Well, that is inhale and hold. Analoma Viloma. I already shared. Yes, you can. If you don't know what it is, Google it and move on. You can lengthen your exhalation and make your inhalation short. It looks something like this. So you sit, focus, and inhale. And slowly, as if a balloon is slowly deflating, you exhale, still sitting motionless. The air runs out. The main thing is not to start gasping for air. Inhale again, and slowly exhale while sitting. That is, our inhalation and exhalation become very, very long so that we can at least touch this gap. Between thoughts, when we constantly exhale thoughts, there are fewer, but we do not blow away the coal, and we are in the moment. The next method is probably relevant for those who have already tried a little bit of meditation and concentration. More precisely, many people have the question of how to stop a conversation that is constantly happening. How did I do it? At least for a few seconds. If you observe, you will understand that the conversation seems to be connected with the neck, with the throat. Yes, as if you were saying it out loud, right here, something is getting tense, the same thing is happening to yourself. Right here, you feel these pleasant sensations spreading, small conversations with yourself, and when you want to stop it, you need to make an effort. Not too much, so that you don't get spasms here. But it's somewhat similar to the throat lock in yoga. Yes, when you do this towards the chin, pressing it to the chest, something like that. I literally put my hand on my throat, and as if with effort, I held back the urge to say something out loud. You just sit like this. So look, all the methods I listed in this video can be used and combined with each other. For example, you hold yourself here and take a long exhale. Inhale, a short one, yes, and in this way gradually the inner dialogue becomes quieter. You won't be able to get rid of it completely and quickly, but if you practice and really set your mind to not wanting to hear your inner conversation, even if it's not clear who you're talking to, you can retrain yourself this way and eventually get rid of it over time. The next method is more suitable for extroverts, for those whose attention is always directed outward somewhere. So we look at the teapot and our attention completely flies away there and we forget about ourselves. The body is not felt. For such people, focusing on bodily sensations is suitable. You can even, if you're sitting on a chair, put something uncomfortable under it so that it's unpleasant for you to sit, and then focus on this unpleasant sensation, that is, don't get distracted from it. Essentially, instead of an external object, we choose our own body as the object of concentration. Or you can wrap your arms around your legs. Yes, just like that. Wrap them and hold. Why do we wrap them? To feel them better. If you can feel them without touching, just by sitting on the chair, you can focus on how you are sitting on the chair. You can intensify a sensation that is already there. That is, you direct your attention to it and don't get distracted. The idea here is also about focused attention that doesn't jump back and forth between various thoughts, feelings, emotions, or sounds. So you feel your body and hold that focus. You can do this while walking, lying in bed, whatever is comfortable for you. If you have trouble feeling your body, you can really make an effort. Walk barefoot at home, feel your feet on the floor. You can lie in the bathtub, stand in the shower, stand under the shower, and really feel your body. Yes, and then in your subsequent attempts, it will already be easier for you on the chair. You will have the knowledge that you can feel your body. If you could feel it in the bath, then you will be able to feel it on the chair as well. And sometimes the opposite happens. When you feel your body too intensely, the sensations are too vivid, and they trigger a lot of thoughts. In that case, you absolutely shouldn't try to feel your body even more strongly. Of course, there is also a method where you go deeper into that feeling, but I think that's not really relevant for anyone here, so instead we focus on a point outside the body, and we keep our attention on that point. Also, for some people, it will be easier to try to get rid of thoughts while walking, because when we walk, we are occupied with something. Our mind. Well, if we're sitting on a chair, we quickly get bored. We're already used to watching some videos, scrolling through something, reading. And when we walk, it feels like we're at least doing something. And it's not so difficult anymore to concentrate on the object. Or on the body, it doesn't matter. And we can walk monotonously like this, say, for half an hour without getting bored. And keep our attention in one place. Our attention will wander and we will bring it back. And in this way, there will also be fewer thoughts. The next method. When an overwhelming mountain of thoughts begins to pile up high on you, in order to effectively clear your mind and release that heavy burden, it is absolutely essential that you remain quite flexible and maintain a genuine sense of inner well-being. Of course, you won't be able to manipulate yourself right away. As I said, by the end of the video, we'll have more complex methods, but they will be more effective. But you need to practice at least stopping your thoughts somehow at first, and then move on to more complex methods. In other words, we need to have some kind of strategy. Regarding how to deal with a specific situation that you are currently facing, what often helps is to look your thoughts in the face. So, you're sitting there, trying to concentrate, struggling, nothing is working out, and you start saying that your life doesn't belong to you anymore, that your thoughts control you, not the other way around. And at such a critical moment, you can take a sudden and decisive step backward. It strongly brings to my mind the vivid image of a wrestling match, when two people are intensely grappling with one another, and one suddenly lets the other go forward and skillfully trips him up, so he loses his balance and falls to the ground. It's the same thing here. We can relax and say, okay, thoughts, come on. What's so important there? What's happening right now? I'm ready to think through all the thoughts I have. Yes, and so when you make such a sharp shift of your attention from certain points just onto yourself, onto those very thoughts, they usually disappear. That is, you relax, start thinking them, and you lose interest in those thoughts. They persist solely because of your own interest. Thoughts occur because you feel something when you think them. You're simply bored when you're not thinking about anything and not feeling anything. You can literally imagine yourself laying out all these thoughts on the table and saying, all right, so what's interesting here? This isn't about the present. We don't need this. I don't even understand why I'm thinking about it at all. Yes, and maybe there will be a couple of directions left that you actually find interesting to think about. And at some point, maybe you'll notice the feelings that these thoughts evoke, and you'll start to look deeper within yourself to find out who you are. What kind of dissatisfaction, so to speak, is causing these thoughts? What do you really want? In other words, thoughts are a kind of key to yourself. To understand why they occur, you need to go deeper within, into the feelings that arise in you, and gradually you'll be able to figure out why these feelings come up. You might even recall the very first emergence of this feeling or complex, some kind of resentment. But all of this only comes with time and practice. Here's another method. You can look your thoughts in the face in a slightly different way. For example, at first you focus on an object outside of yourself, and then with the same intensity you turn your attention inward. It's as if you open your eyes wide. By the way, you can also use this as a method when you're looking outward. That is, open your eyes wide and really tune into everything, yes. Try to latch onto this material world, to be as present as possible. Really feel everything here. Examine everything down to the smallest details, and you can do the same with your thoughts. So it's not like in the previous method where you lay them out on the table and think about them, but rather look inward with that same sharpness and openness. So here, you really need to look closely. What's going on in there? What thoughts are there? What's happening right now? Do I have a specific thought right now? Yes, usually when you ask someone, okay, you're saying you can't stop your thoughts right now. What thoughts are coming up for you? They start to look, can't figure it out, think about it, and realize, well, there don't seem to be any thoughts anymore. Yes, so it's like you kind of need to stump yourself. Of course, when you're guiding someone, it's easier to do because they don't know how the conversation will unfold. But here, you have to stump yourself in this way. In other words, roughly speaking, one part of you stumps another part of you. For this, of course, you already need some skills in self-observation. And now we smoothly move on to the next method. It consists in the fact that thoughts do not need to be stopped. It's a strange idea in general because, well, it's unnatural. You have some thoughts, right? You've been thinking them your whole life for a reason. You have certain feelings. For some reason, you've been feeling them your whole life. There are certain emotions. There are sensory perceptions. All of this just happens to you. And it's very strange to put a spoke in the wheel to this being called a human. That's just how the body functions. We didn't invent or program this body. It just turned out this way. Fate, life made us the way we are. If you accept this fact, you can do it in front of a mirror. Just look at yourself and realize that you don't really have any special connection to this body in terms of its development. You can just sit like this and look. And at some point, or maybe even by following one of the recommendations from the video, at some point you'll notice that there are thoughts, but you don't have to stop them. You are separate from your thoughts. Thoughts are happening somewhere in the background. You hear some sound and immediately feelings and thoughts arise, but you notice all of this as if from the outside. From the outside doesn't mean that you're standing somewhere else in the room and observing. What I mean is, there is a distance that appears between you and your thoughts, a kind of gap. That is, you can, for example, look at something and realize that thoughts are spinning in your mind right now. You can speak and be aware that thoughts are running in the background, but you don't fall out of the moment. In other words, you remain here and now. This is already quite a high level for someone who is learning to meditate. But you can learn to notice your own thoughts like this and not touch them, just let them be. And probably this is the only method that ultimately helps them to live. Because any kind of struggle, after all, it's unnatural, and essentially you are just suppressing your thoughts, and along with your thoughts you suppress your feelings, all your reactions, pushing them somewhere inside. But if you are open and allow everything to be, then for example, if you observe your thinking for a year, you will get so fed up with what goes on in your mind, where did all this even come from, that you will really get to know yourself. Thus, probably the only way to self-inquiry is simply to do nothing but to be here, effortlessly present in the moment. And when you have observed yourself internally well, of course, certain skills are needed here too, because it is difficult. You might only notice things when you are sitting in a chair, but you need to notice them specifically during interactions in everyday life. Then you will see all your masks, how you try to present yourself in a certain way to others. Yes, this is already a deeper, more advanced level. If you observe all of this, you will have only one desire, to stop it all, because you will simply get tired of what's going on in your head. It's constant chaos, and this will be the first step toward getting rid of thoughts and thinking in the way it currently is. Your mind will simply start to stop from time to time. You will find yourself sitting, zoning out, focusing on something, and remaining in silence. Not because you decided to awaken or do something with yourself, to learn, to meditate, but simply because, naturally, you'll get tired of it. If you observe your thinking for a year, even for just one day actually, you'll very quickly lose interest in it. Our inner world is interesting to us only as long as we don't look into it, as long as we don't have the opportunity to look inside. As soon as we look inside, that's it. It immediately loses its value. We realize that there is no meaning in it. Everything becomes as simple as possible, as natural as possible, and then comes silence. I'll see you in the next videos. Good luck to everyone. Goodbye.